How many farms can I fit in this red square? It is not very big. You know, it seemed like it would be bigger in my head, but a 6x6 square is not particularly large. Good thing this square is actually 7x7. How did I mess that up? I failed at the first job of the video, which is actually making the square itself. Building the square was meant to be the easy part. I was not concerned about the building of the square for this video. Okay, so we've got a 7x7 square that we need to cram a bunch of farms into. And yeah, I mean, I'm curious as to how this is going to go. Obviously, the beauty of this being a square and not a cube is that we have got vertical space to play with. So we're just going to have to be smart with the way that we arrange things. First things first, storage system. Obviously, there's no point in building a whole bunch of farms if there's nowhere to store the items from all of the farms. So I think if I just start plonking some chests down here, this should do the trick. Wow, I'm struggling today, aren't I? This certainly isn't going to win any design awards, but it is functional. So any items that flow into this hopper here will first flow into these chests and then gradually fill up the entire storage system until it's completely filled to the brim. Now, there aren't any fancy automatic sorters in here. This is just a simple storage system where all of the items from all of the farms are going to end up in all of the chests. Melon and pumpkin farm. So I'm going to have to build this one from the ground up, and the first thing that I've got to do is the item collection system, which is going to be done making use of a minecart hopper that is going to be winding its way round this little platform here. And immediately, I have made this video about 80% more annoying. Yep. That sound is going to be playing for the rest of this. Now I need to make sure that our soil is hydrated, and the fact that we can waterlog stairs. I know this isn't a new addition, but the fact that we can waterlog these things makes compact builds so much easier. Imagine if I had to have blocks around the back here. That would make this area 3x3. We would only have a 3x3 melon and pumpkin farm. Consider the soil tilled and consider the seeds planted. And a pumpkin has just immediately grown. So I guess this is a very good start for off. Okay, this is weird. What is the random tick speed set to on this world? It's only set to 3. That's the default. We're just getting ridiculously lucky. It just happened again. This is the most efficient farm I've ever built. What on earth is going on? That's what? Forget Sidecraft and their gigantic farms. All they need is this 5x5 melon and pumpkin farm. They're sorted. So this is the automatic part of the farm. We've got observers that are going to detect when these things move over and have grown a pumpkin, and then we'll have pistons facing downwards, which will break the thing that has just grown. Job done. Melon and pumpkin farm all sorted, and it is already producing some melons. Now, villagers. And it makes a lot more sense if the villagers are near the storage system so that they're both accessible, so I've moved our melon and pumpkin farm. And I've immediately gotten a bit carried away and just started building up this thing without doing much talking. So with this little setup I've created here, we've got 6 villager modules per level. We've got 2 levels, which means that we should be able to have 12 villagers, all with different professions and traits. Now, the only thing that I was worried about is how I was going to travel from the storage system up into this villager area, and then I remembered these things. I can't even remember what they're called, but they're awesome. Now, to make sure that our villagers don't decide to go for other trades, all of them are placed on top of double carpet, which essentially stops their pathfinding algorithm, at least in theory. If I place this villager here, he should only be able to see the smithing table. And I think that's worked. So then this guy with the stone cutter, that looks pretty good. And this guy with the brewing stand, everything seems to be working properly. So we've got all of our farmers in. Those are going to turn all of the drops from our farms into emeralds. And then importantly, we've got our row of scientists, which are going to give us a bunch of awesome enchanted books. And if the sound of the hopper minecart wasn't enough, we now have the sound of 12 villagers to add to the annoyance of this video. This is looking pretty cool already though, isn't it? Next up, Sugarcane farm. Sugarcane is super important for getting rockets so that we can fly around with elytras, and once again, this is going to involve a hopper minecart, because clearly I hate your eardrums. Once again, waterlogging stairs is one of the best features in Minecraft. I think we can all agree this already looks pretty epic. Now the plan is to have all of the sugarcane in this sort of checkerboard pattern right here, and pretty similar to how we did the melon and pumpkin farm, I'm going to have downwards facing pistons that break everything. Now I do accept that some of the sugarcane is going to fly off the edge of this thing and never be picked up, but I'm thinking that having them here, even if they're inefficient, is probably going to produce more sugarcane than not having them here, but have 100% efficiency inside the farm. Now the only thing that I now have to work out is how I'm actually going to fire these pistons, because I don't want to use observers or like have a control sugarcane that it detects, because that's pretty slow. I want to do this on a timer, but I don't really have much space for a timer. I'm hoping something like this should work. It's like a hopper timer, but I've had to slightly change things so that we don't get any powering of pistons. But I imagine I imagine this should be all okay, and it was, but it was also right in the way of my hopper line, which just won't do. So instead, I've created a redstone clock, which is connected up to the minecart that is traveling around underneath this farm, and that should give us a fairly consistent pulse that isn't too rapid, but is fast enough that it should harvest any sugarcane that grows pretty quickly. Carrots and potatoes. Now this one could be ridiculously simple or ridiculously complicated, depending on how stupid I am with villagers. All of my villager knowledge is essentially from before they changed them up, so I'm essentially going to throw out a real Hail Mary on this one and just see what happens. So I've got my composter in the middle, that's all good. I've also got a light source, so that should keep things bright. All of this is now farmland, and in case you're wondering, I'm not putting any boundaries on this because I'm assuming villagers aren't so stupid that they'll walk off the edge. You know, I know they're stupid, but they're not that stupid. Right, now I've got a field of potatoes, I've got a villager, and I am just going to start lobbing potatoes at this guy and hope that he enjoys it. And then I'm also going to place down this guy right here, which is hopefully going to be the potato throw receiver. Yes! Yeah, he just vomited a bunch of potatoes, and I'm assuming they all went into this hopper? It looks like they all went into this hopper. Well, on the short term, this seems to be working. It all seems to be working properly. Long term, it could completely mess up. But the evidence would suggest otherwise, because I've just left this thing running for a little while, and I've also built up a carrot farm. And I have to say, it seems to be doing pretty well. So we had 3.5 stacks from the initial vomit, but then an extra half stack and a bit. So around about 45 potatoes have been produced. Next up, wheat farm. Now this is going to work fairly similarly to the way that the carrot and potato farms work, except there's one key difference. Instead of our farmer picking up carrots, or in this case, not picking up carrots, throw your carrots, man! Your inventory's full. But actually, this is quite a good example of what's going to happen with the wheat farm. So we're going to fill up the villager's inventory with seeds, so that he can constantly plant wheat. But then whenever he harvests the wheat, he'll only be able to pick up the seeds, so the wheat will be left on the floor. And then we're going to pick that up, making use of hopper minecarts. My goodness, I just watched the absolute king of carrot dispenses. Look at the... He's thrown out 5 stacks of carrots from his inventory. Anyway, I think our wheat farm should now be done. We've got our villager, we've got all of the seeds, we've got the farmland, we've got the hopper minecart. I mean, these things really are quite simple, aren't they? And I gotta say, our tower of farms is starting to look incredibly cool. So let's move on to the next, which is kelp. Now, it's actually been an incredibly long time since I've built any form of kelp farm, but I think it works something a little bit like this. So when the kelp grows, we can detect an update from the bottom kelp, and then we can break the top kelp. I have absolutely no idea if this is going to work. Like, oh dear. Alright, I mean, maybe once I get the kelp in, maybe it'll be okay. Yeah, that seems to have helped. And now that everything is all in place, this works really, really nicely. So you can see when the kelp grows, it gets broken by the piston and immediately gets pushed off, hitting this fence post, then immediately being picked up by the hopper. And a nice little benefit is that when you look at it from this angle, it kind of looks like a face. Now, if you're wondering what I'm harvesting kelp for, it's because it is very useful for fueling furnaces, which I think we can all agree is quite important. And there is one other crop that can do that: bamboo. It's time for a bamboo farm. Now, normally I use flying machines for these sorts of bamboo farms, but sadly, because of the 6x6 limitation, that would be a bit of a struggle. It just wouldn't be that efficient. So I've tried my best to come up with something new here, and I actually quite like it. I quite like the idea of this one. So what we've got in the center is a redstone clock. We've got a redstone clock in the middle there. That's going to be controlling when these things are going to be pulsing. And then these are going to be pulsing relatively slowly so that we can ensure that the blocks actually get pushed across into the hoppers. Because if they go too fast, occasionally these items can kind of just jump around and go outside of the farm and not actually end up in the hoppers, which is exactly what we don't want. And everything so far seems to be working really quite nicely. Like, you can see, bamboo grows, immediately pushed into the hoppers, picked up straight away, no issues there. I love it when I record a clip saying that something is working, then the farm clearly displays it's working. I mean, look at that! Look! There was another one that grew! And then it got picked up immediately. How cool was that? It's like the melon and pumpkin farm all over again. Oh no! Just as I press cut! Just as I cut it! It actually harvested something. That would have been like the perfect example. Regardless, everything seems to be going pretty well farming-wise. I mean, look at all of this stuff. All of that is being generated by a 7x7 area. I mean, it's a very tall 7x7 area, but it's still a 7x7 area. Next, automatic wool farm. Clearly, the person building this is interested in redstone, and everyone knows that a true redstone engineer will only ever do redstone on wool. So this is obviously an incredibly important resource. And thanks to a relatively recent Minecraft update, it is also quite an easy resource to get a lot of, fully automatically. This should be all we need to automatically shear our sheep, so when this grass gets turned into dirt, the observer will detect it, firing the dispenser, which will fire shears at the sheep, violently removing their wool. And then this hopper minecart, which thankfully isn't making a bunch of noise, will be sat underneath it, ready to pick up all of the wool and drop them into our hopper line. And I have to say, now that it's all fully built, this farm is looking excellent. I really like the way that it's come together, and I'm very happy with how it perfectly slots into our little build area. Is there anything else I can say about this thing to drag it out so that we might... Yes, we saw it. See, look, there was a sheep, and it did the grass thing, and then it got sheared automatically, and then the wool got picked up. Now, one thing that I definitely didn't have in that design is any way to replenish the grass once the sheep had eaten it. So now we have this little meadow here, which allows the grass to spread back onto the dirt blocks. So that is my sheep farm all complete. Next up, a mob farm. Now, this will be my first time making a mob farm in a 7x7 area. I have to say, this could be interesting, but if I can pull this off, it is going to be epic. I went through a few design ideas in my head, and I finally think I've come up with one that's cool, and that is to have a shifting floor design. So the mobs are going to spawn on this 4x5 area, so we've got 20 possible spawning spaces here, which isn't too bad. Magnified over, say, 5 layers, we'll end up with 100 spawning spaces, which is really quite good. And every 10 seconds or so, this floor is going to bounce back and forth, allowing all of the mobs to drop down through all the layers, falling to their deaths down here. I'm hoping this design still works, although I'm fairly certain it doesn't work unless there's something that stops them from moving. That is the case. So I've done some redesigning, and now I have this setup right here. So you can see we've got trapdoors that's going to hold the mob in place, and then we have a mix of slabs and also soul sand. And soul sand is ever so slightly lower than the top of the slab. So what happens is that the slab moves across, and then the mob is inside the block, so we'll drop through the slab down onto the next layer. The only thing that I messed up with this design initially is I made it too fast to trickle through the layers, which means that every single time this pulses, say for example a mob spawns up here, they would just drop down to this layer and then stay there until it pulses again, and it would take forever for the mobs to actually get out of the farm. In fact, there are a bunch of things that I messed up. This has caused a lot of headaches. But finally, I think I've got it sorted, and as you can see, it does appear to be working quite nicely. But to really test it, I've chucked my guy up at the top here. He is looking incredibly festive still. It's the 6th of January. This is ridiculous. But if I transfer myself into spectator mode now, we should begin to see some mobs starting to spawn inside of our mob spawner. There we go. We've got 2 skeletons dropping through right now. We've got a couple of creepers, and of course some other mobs as well. I mean, don't get me wrong, you know, this isn't the most efficient mob farm I've ever created in my entire life, but you can see it is producing drops, which is quite impressive for something that is in a 7x7 area. 7x7. With that being said, this 7x7 area is really producing some items. I mean, look at this. Look, we've got a bunch of wool. We've got gunpowder. We've got tons upon tons of sugarcane. That sugarcane farm is doing really well. Carrots and potatoes by the plenty. Melons and pumpkins. You know, we've got... This is really everything that you need. Like, you really don't need much more than this, to be honest with you, to survive in a Minecraft world. If you did a few AFK sessions at this, you know, spending some time overnight, you would actually be sorted with resources. I am genuinely shocked to see the number of items in here. This is ridiculous. So we've got our little villager trading hall right here so that we can gather up all the resources. We've got ourselves a tiny little melon and pumpkin farm. We've got a sugarcane farm. We've got a potato farm, a carrot farm, a wheat farm. We've got a kelp farm so that we can get extra fuel. And then if we need even more fuel than that, we've got a bamboo farm, we've got a wool farm so that we can build up redstone contraptions, and finally we've got ourselves a mob farm. This is seriously good going, and this has been seriously good fun. I've absolutely loved making this redstone video. I really do hope that you enjoyed it, and I will catch you in the next one. See ya!